Auckland's water pipes leak 50 million litres every single day. Not per month, per day. Watercare just announced a $500 million emergency investment to patch the holes. That is on top of the $13.8 billion 10-year program, already running across 110 concurrent projects right beneath your feet. Wellington sits on a fault line. There is a 15% probability of a magnitude 7.5 earthquake within the next century. Economic modelling puts the repair bill at $4 billion. 346 deaths, nearly 3,000 injuries. That is the conservative scenario. So here is the proposition. You are not looking for a charming town with a good cafe. You are looking for coordinates where the infrastructure holds, the medical window is survivable, and the sovereign risk is manageable. A plan B that actually works. Today we are running a cold-eyed audit of 8 small New Zealand towns, not through the lens of a tourism brochure, through a logistical checklist that covers medical evacuation, windows, power and water independence, and geological stability. Your retirement is not about the view. It is about the infrastructure beneath that view. Let's get into it. There is a town on the South Island's east coast where the streets are paved with white limestone and the Victorian architecture has barely changed in 150 years. The median house price sits well below what you would pay for a parking space in Auckland, and that town is Oamaru. The entry cost here is genuinely low because the Waitaki district consistently records some of the most affordable property values in the South Island. You are looking at a town of 14,000 people with a functioning main street, a working harbour, and a local economy built on farming and light manufacturing. On paper, it checks several boxes. Here is what nobody tells you. Oamaru sits roughly an hour and 40 minutes south of Christchurch by road. Christchurch is where the nearest Level 1 trauma centre is located. In a cardiac event, or a serious accident requiring immediate surgery, that drive is the difference between an outcome and an obituary. The 90-minute medical evacuation window is not a bureaucratic guideline. It is a survival metric. Oamaru sits right at its edge. The power picture is more stable. The South Island's hydro-dominated grid gives the whole region a resilience premium over the North Island. The Waitaki River hydro scheme runs from the Mackenzie Basin down to the coast and serves as one of New Zealand's most significant power corridors. When the national grid fluctuates, those local generation assets provide a real buffer. The geological profile is favourable. Oamaru is not sitting on a major active fault line. The Alpine Faults Risk Corridor runs along the west coast, so the east coast receives much lighter shaking rather than a direct rupture. That matters when you are looking for long-term stability. The social reality is something else. Oamaru attracts retirees who want character and an unhurried pace. It delivers those things. The town's economy, though, remains very narrow. Employment options are limited, and the specialist medical clinics or aged care facilities you will eventually need are in Christchurch or Dunedin. The charm is real. The logistical ceiling is just as real. The pattern is remarkably consistent across these affordable South Island towns. You get a low entry cost and high character. You also get thin infrastructure. The question is not whether you can buy here cheaply. The question is whether you can age here safely. Whakataane records more sunshine hours than almost anywhere else on the North Island, clocking in at about 2,300 hours every single year. The Ohope Beach stretch is consistently rated as one of the best in New Zealand, and the town sits right on the eastern edge of the Bay of Plenty. It is backed by the Urewera Ranges and faces north toward the open water, which means that on a clear day, you can see White Island sitting right on the horizon. You can also see that same island erupt. This is where the logistical audit gets complicated for any serious buyer. Whakataane is the closest mainland town to Wakari, the most active marine volcano in the country. The December 2019 eruption killed 22 people and triggered a complete rethink of how the region handles visitor access and emergency response. The volcanic risk here is not a theoretical scenario found in a textbook. It is documented, it is recent, and the geological activity is ongoing. The town supports a population of around 18,000 people and has a functioning local hospital for general acute care. Whakaatani Hospital is not a Level 1 trauma centre. For any major medical emergency, you are looking at a transfer to Waikato Hospital in Hamilton. That trip takes approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes by road, under normal conditions. That window sits well outside the survivable threshold for severe trauma. The property market is more accessible than Auckland. Do not come here expecting a total bargain though. Broader price growth across the Bay of Plenty has pushed values upward, and while you get genuine space and a real community for your money, the trade-off is steep. You are giving up proximity to Tier 1 medical infrastructure in exchange for a volcanic neighbour that gives zero advance notice before it activates. The locals understand this. Most of them have lived with the shadow of the volcano for generations. For a retiree arriving from a city with 4 hospitals within a 20-minute radius, the adjustment is not about the scenery. It is an existential calculation. Cambridge does not announce itself with flashy signs or loud marketing. It sits 20 minutes south of Hamilton and about an hour and 45 minutes from Auckland, tucked away in the flat green heart of the Waikato. For years, it has been quietly attracting the kind of wealth that does not feel the need to shout. The town is home to 11,600 people and features tree-lined streets with a main strip full of independent businesses. More importantly, it sits inside what is arguably the most strategically valuable agricultural zone in the Southern Hemisphere. The Waikato region produces 25% of the total milk output for New Zealand, supported by 4,800 dairy farms. These operations move 540 million kilograms of milk solids annually, generating $6.8 billion in agricultural GDP every year. Being surrounded by that much productive land is not just a lifestyle choice. It is a functional insurance policy against a total supply chain collapse. The property market reflects exactly who already knows about this security. As of December 2025, the average house value in Cambridge sits at $1,082,950. That is certainly not a cheap entry point, but it is not Wanaka prices either. What you are actually buying for that $1 million price tag is access to the most important infrastructure asset on the NZ Uncharted checklist. Waikato Hospital in Hamilton is a verified Level 1 trauma centre located just a 20-minute drive from Cambridge. That distance is not just within the survivable window for a medical emergency. It is comfortably inside it. For any retiree running a serious risk calculation on their health, that proximity alone separates Cambridge from almost every other small town in the country. The energy picture here is grid connected, rather than being right next to a power station. While you are not sitting directly next to a dam, the Waikato River hydro chain runs right through the region, and the South Island's geothermal baseload provides a level of national grid stability that benefits the whole area. Cambridge is not energy independent, as no town on a national grid truly is, but the broader Waikato network is better buffered against failure than most. The geological risk in this part of the country is remarkably low. No major active fault lines run beneath the town, and the primary rupture corridor for the Alpine Fault is 400 kilometers to the southwest. The one variable that the real estate brochures always seem to skip is the equine economy. Cambridge is the horse breeding capital of New Zealand, and that industry drives land values in ways that have nothing to do with standard retirement demographics. When the equine market corrects, which it does periodically, the knock-on effect on surrounding property values is very real. It is not a crisis, but it is a cycle you need to understand before you assume this asset is purely defensive. Nelson receives more sunlight than almost any other corner of New Zealand, clocking in between 2,400 and 2,537 hours every single year. The geography explains the data, as mountain ranges to the west and south act as a physical shield that deflects cloud cover and heavy rainfall away from the basin. Temperatures stay mild and frosts are rare, creating a climate that is genuinely exceptional for the latitude. Nelson knows it. That is the problem. The sunshine tax in Nelson is a documented reality operating on multiple levels of the local economy. Property values have been driven upward by decades of lifestyle migration from people chasing the light, the art scene, and the craft beer. These buyers arrive with city money and bid prices up to levels that no longer reflect the actual economic fundamentals of a regional town of 55,000 people. The gap between what Nelson costs and what the local job market can actually support is one of the most persistent structural anomalies in New Zealand real estate. The medical infrastructure centres on Nelson Hospital, roughly 30 minutes from the city centre. It handles general acute care and offers a range of specialist services. It is not a Level 1 trauma centre. The pathway for major emergencies runs directly to Christchurch, approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes by road. Same uncomfortable arithmetic as Oamaru. just with a sunnier backdrop. The geological profile carries a moderate risk that most residents choose to ignore until the ground starts moving. Marlborough's fault systems run just to the east, and the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake proved exactly how disruptive those faults are to infrastructure and critical supply chains. Nelson itself sits on relatively stable ground. The regional road network, though, remains highly vulnerable to the same seismic events that can sever State Highway 1 along the coast. Nelson sells you a high quality of life. What it cannot always deliver is true logistical independence from the rest of the island. The sunshine is real. The tax is even more real. You need to be very clear about which one you are actually paying for. Blenheim sits at the top of the South Island on the Wairau Plain, ringed by mountains on 3 sides and open to the Marlborough Sounds to the north. The sun here is relentless, providing around 2,500 hours of light per year and making it one of the consistently sunniest towns in the entire country. The surrounding landscape is almost entirely dominated by vineyards, and since Marlborough produces roughly 75% of New Zealand's total wine, the grapes effectively own the town. Sauvignon Blanc built this local economy, and the economy built a service hub designed to support the industry. For a retiree with significant means, Blenheim offers a specific kind of appeal because the pace is unhurried and the food culture is legitimate. Property values remain lower than Nelson despite having a comparable climate, and the town of 32,000 people maintains a functioning commercial centre with direct air links to Wellington and Auckland. On a surface audit, the location scores reasonably well for anyone looking to exit the major cities. Here's what nobody tells you about Blenheim. The 2016 Kaikoura earthquake hit the regional infrastructure like a precision strike and changed the logistical map overnight. State Highway 1 south of Blenheim was severed completely. The coast road stayed closed for over a year. Rail links were suspended indefinitely. The town was effectively cut off from the South Island's main spine for an extended period, and freight and supply chains took months to return to anything resembling normal. The epicenter was 80 kilometers south, and the Marlborough Fault Zone is one of the most seismically active areas in New Zealand. Blenheim sits directly inside its risk corridor. The medical window follows the same pattern of isolation you have seen across this list. Wairau Hospital handles general acute care. For major trauma, the transfer pathway runs to Nelson Hospital, 30 minutes north, or Christchurch, 2.5 hours south. The vineyard lifestyle is genuine. The sovereign risk embedded in the geology beneath the vines is equally genuine and far more permanent. The strategic calculation is not a simple yes or no. Blenheim is not a trap in the traditional sense. It is a town where you must audit the road network, the fault maps, and the supply chain resilience before you ever consider pricing a wine country premium into your relocation decision. The sunshine is free. The infrastructure risk is a debt that eventually comes due. Wanaka is where you go once you realize Queenstown is just a performance. It offers the same jagged mountains and the same glacial lake geometry, but with only a fraction of the foot traffic. The property market here tells you exactly who already made that calculation. The average house value in Wanaka hit $1,963,000 by December 2025. One residential sale in September of that same year reached $6,350,000, proving this is not a retirement town in any traditional sense. It is an insurance policy denominated in New Zealand dollars for people whose primary assets are held in something else entirely. Peter Thiel is now the wealthiest man in New Zealand with a fortune of about $28 billion, and he famously purchased a 477-acre sheep station right near Lake Wanaka. Sam Altman has publicly stated they have an agreement to fly to that specific property by private jet if a global disaster strikes. Wanaka is not where the wealthy go to spend their golden years, but rather where they go to survive whatever comes next, and that distinction should drive your own strategic calculation. The geography here enforces the math. Wanaka sits in an inland glacial basin at an elevation of about 300 meters, and it is completely surrounded by peaks that exceed 2,000 meters. Lake Hawea to the north was dammed back in the 1950s for hydroelectric power, which gives this immediate area a layer of energy independence that most other towns simply cannot match. The logistical ceiling is very real. This basin geography limits how easily you can get in or out. The only roads are narrow mountain passes. In a major grid failure or an infrastructure collapse, that isolation cuts both ways. You are harder to reach from the outside and harder to leave in a hurry. The medical window is your most exposed variable in this coordinate. The nearest level 1 trauma center is more than 3 hours away, by road under perfect conditions. That is the sharpest trade-off on this entire list. The asset value in Wanaka is extraordinary. The medical evacuation risk is just as high. This location only rewards those who have a plan for both. Napier is easily one of the most visually coherent towns in New Zealand. After the 1931 earthquake leveled the original city, the rebuild created a concentrated Art Deco precinct that architects still travel across the world to study. The climate stays warm and dry. The Hawke's Bay region produces the best red wine in the country, and the waterfront promenade is legitimate. On a surface audit, Napier looks like the retirement answer nobody is talking about. Then Cyclone Gabrielle hit in February of 2023. Napier was instantly cut off from the rest of the country. Roads were destroyed, the power went out, and the entire region lost its connection to the national grid for weeks. Transpower's own records show the massive scale of the damage to the local transmission lines, and the city of Gisborne nearby lost all internet connectivity for 12 full days. This was not some rare edge case. It was a preview of the future. Much of Napier sits on reclaimed land. The same 1931 earthquake that destroyed the town also lifted the seafloor of the inner harbour by 2 metres, which created the flat ground where most of the modern city stands today. This geology means the ground beneath significant parts of the town is prone to liquefaction. During the next seismic event along the active faults in Hawke's Bay, that reclaimed land will be the very first thing to fail. Hawke's Bay Hospital in Hastings handles the regional acute care, and it sits about 20 minutes away from central Napier. It is a regional facility rather than a level 1 trauma centre, so the transfer pathway for major injuries runs to Waikato Hospital in Hamilton. That trip takes between 2.5 to 3 hours depending on the roads, and after Cyclone Gabrielle, those road conditions were no longer a hypothetical problem. The Art Deco charm is genuine, but the coastal exposure is just as real. Napier is a town where the aesthetics and the risk profile are moving in exactly opposite directions. Before you decide to pay the lifestyle premium here, you need to audit the hazard maps. The 1931 earthquake is history, but the next one is a mathematical probability. Kerikeri sits in the Bay of Islands, roughly 60 kilometres north of Whangarei, where a subtropical microclimate allows citrus and avocados to grow at a commercial scale. The town supports about 8,000 permanent residents and a thriving arts economy, but the real story is the land market. Auckland retirees have discovered how far their equity travels this far north, and they are quietly pushing property prices upward. The pace of life here feels genuinely different. That is not a marketing pitch, it is geography. But here is what the relocation brochure skips entirely. Kerikeri is located at the end of a very long road. Your nearest city is Whangarei, which is an hour south, while Auckland is a 3-hour drive under perfect conditions. That drive time changes instantly when State Highway 1 closes north of Auckland. And in the far north, those closures happen often. This region has one of the most vulnerable road networks in the entire country. Flooding events that shut down SH10 or SH1 are not rare anomalies. They are seasonal realities that compress supply chains the moment the rain starts. When the roads close, the price of basics goes up, and your access to specialist services simply disappears. The medical situation is the sharpest constraint you will face. Northland's primary trauma pathway runs all the way to Auckland City Hospital, which is the only verified level 1 centre in the area. If you are in Kerikeri, you are 3 hours away by road. During a major weather event that shuts the highway, your only exit strategy is an air evacuation. That option depends entirely on pilot visibility, aircraft availability, and the severity of the storm itself. For a retiree in their 70s, that is a dangerous set of dependencies to rely on. The subtropical climate remains the genuine asset here. You get mild winters, almost no frost risk, and incredibly productive soil. Because the Bay of Islands has enough people to maintain a critical mass, the town supports independent cafes and a functioning real estate market. Property values stay lower than what you would find in the Waikato or Marlborough, so the entry cost is attractive. However, your energy independence is still tied to the grid, and the far north sits at the end of a long distribution line from Auckland. The reliability data for rural Northland does not look good. The distance from power generation is a structural weakness, and the vulnerability to storms that wreck distribution infrastructure is well documented. Kerikeri offers serenity by design, but it also offers isolation by default. Every town on this list is full of locals who will tell you moving there was the best decision they ever made. They are not lying to you. They are just not telling you the whole story. New Zealand does not demolish its failures. It just stops visiting them. Before you sign a contract, you need to pull the council hazard maps and check the managed retreat classifications. Calculate your medical evacuation window and decide if you can actually live inside it. Your retirement is not about the view. It is about what survives beneath that view. when the grid goes down and the road closes. Subscribe if you want to understand the geography the tourism boards skip. I will see you in the next one.